Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
How's it feel to see all these old friends back in one
I'm
room?
just delighted. This is so cool.
Good.
Yeah, I was in a grocery store 2 days ago,
And now
wandering around. Yeah, he was in. Tell him to get out. No, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Well, it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Let me put this out as just a general question. Anybody can respond. Besides Hugh and Howard, did any of you work in radio before you got cast in these jobs?
I did a lot of radio commercials, but I hadn't been like a disc jockey or anything like
Right.
that. But I did a lot of work on the radio.
Did you like that?
I loved it.
And
yeah.
did it help prepare you for the show in a bit?
Well, a little bit. I mean, I was on the radio. I think in one episode I had a show.
Yeah.
Ask Jennifer.
Right.
And so it did prepare me a little bit.
Being
Good.
beautiful is what prepared her.
You know, it's funny, I never noticed that part of her personality. But now that you mention it, yeah.
What he said to all of us.
The best radio stations have a strong chemistry that develops amongst the staff. It's really important, that people, they really, end up loving each other in a way. What was the chemistry like on the set of WKRP?
Me?
Anyone who'd like
I
to
thought
say?
it was very good. Very, very good.
Well, I can talk only about the pilot because that's all I directed. But what happened was I had worked for MTM and done the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and then I left and I went to work on a show called Soap. And I get a call from Grant Tinker and saying, we've got a pilot, love you to read it, and would you come do it? And I read the script and it was great. But I got there about 2 weeks before we were to start shooting, and there were really 2 big parts that weren't cast yet. And I had just worked with Gordon Jump on Soap, and there was a guy that we had kept reading for Soap for parts, but he never got him. We all loved him, but he was never right for the part. And then what happened is there's a trial, and it turned out we cast this guy as the defense attorney. And then there was just one show. And he was so wonderful. The next week, the trial starts, and we had to cast the prosecuting attorney. So we cast him and said they were twins. So now I come over, and it's 2 weeks to go, and there's no cast for those 2 parts. So I said, well, I know 2 guys, one Gordon Jump and another guy, Howard somebody or other. And what happened, I don't know if you remember this, Howard, but Grant Tinker came to me and said, well, Howard won't sign a contract to do the pilot. And I said, he's so good. I bet he'll love being here, and he's really funny. Why don't you just take a chance and see how it goes? And of course, we all know how it went, and obviously Howard enjoyed being there. But this cast the cast just worked out so well from the first day. It was a well-written script, and they all were just so good for their parts.
I would like to say something that Jay Sandridge is the Werner von Braun of television comedy.
Wait.
Something along that line. And when
German? He's German?
Yeah.
No, and he has never messed around with rockets. I don't know why I meant that. I just meant really, really good. He is like the father of, and when I first went to work at MTM, I was able to sneak up and watch the Mary Show rehearse. And I would watch Jay and Jim Brooks and Alan Burns and all that. And I began to understand how this whole thing works, because they would start on a Monday morning with a script that maybe was not all that great. And through rewrites and direction and looking, and of course God bless these guys, I would be giving them rewrites 10 seconds before they went on, and they'd be like, oh, okay. But Jay and those people in this legendary show would take this script, and by Friday night it would be Emmy ready. Emmy ready. So it was a huge, huge boost that Jay agreed to direct the WKRP pilot. That kind of got CBS's attention as well. And he did bring Gordon Jump to us, and I just jumped at Jump. He was the best, wasn't he?
The best.
Yeah, he was just the best. I can't imagine anybody, you know, it was just wonderful. And we miss him tremendously. He's the only one of us that's
My
not-
first introduction to WKRP was while the pilot was being rehearsed. I was directing The Facts of Life on the same lot, and I heard that Jay was on the lot directing a pilot that was supposed to, there was a buzz already around it. And we had met because I was observing and learning from the master.
Oh, come on.
It's true,
Because he was
Warner.
so much older than the rest of us. So anyway, so I stopped during a break in our rehearsals, and I went to the set to see WKRP, and I happened to walk in when Johnny Fever is in the control booth, and he had been notified not to say a certain word. And I was there for that rehearsal, and just at the moment I walked in, Johnny Fever stood up and said, "Booger!" And I said, I hope this is a show I can work on one of these days.
Does that not date the show that Booger could put you on? My God. And by the way, Howard on the pilot, Howard is he doesn't like authority.
I'd rather you didn't say that.
He doesn't even like other people making comments. But anyhow,
I'm sorry, said the word booger out loud.
I had seen him with the committee in San Francisco, which was, you know, I thought as good as Second City, Chicago, in my opinion. So I wanted him so badly, and I didn't care whether he had a contract or not. And of course, doing a pilot with such a key character didn't have a contract was madness. But thank God Jay and Grant agreed to it, and Howard, I don't know, he held our feet to the fire after that, and demanded 20 pairs of shoes. This man has better footwear than anybody we've ever heard of.
He's the most fashionable
Yeah.
person in the group, yeah.
Before we, because I've got questions that I'm burning to ask each and every one of you individually. However, so we don't have to make him hold, we have one of your colleagues on the phone, Gary Sandy, who played the program director, Andy Travis. Gary, are you with us?
Yes, I certainly am. Hello, my friends, everybody. And there's Hugh bringing down the house as usual. I tell you, Hugh. Listen, I miss everybody. I'm so sorry I can't be there with you.
Well, it's you're missed. Everybody lit up when I said your name. So, give us one of your better memories of working with this crew.
Oh, well, I mean, it is a family. I mean, everybody is just a sweetheart. I mean, I just love everybody. Haven't seen Tim in a long time. I don't know. I think that a lot of the scenes sort of blended together for me. I can remember a lot of the scenes, but I couldn't tell you what episodes they were in. I can tell you this, that my favorite episode is Less on a Ledge. I think that is a real scream. That for anybody that knows what that is, there was two storylines running at the same time, and everybody thought they knew what each other was talking about, but nobody had any idea. It's just a great episode. I think one of my fondest memories is that of how you could come in and start rehearsal on a Monday, and right away, as soon as they would hear the table read, the writers, Hugh and all the writers, would go up and start working right away. They knew exactly what wasn't working, and these pages would keep coming down to the set. It just always amazed me as to how they did that.
Wow, that's fantastic. Before we let him go, anybody got a question they'd like to say or anything they'd like to say?
Yeah, why aren't you here?
didn't catch that. What did he say?
Why aren't you here?
Oh, well, I had a job to do. Actually, I was working. How about that for
Oh, good. That's a good
for
excuse.
something new?
That
So are
changes
we.
everything.
And the weird thing about it is, I'm doing a lot of radio. I'm doing a lot of live radio dramas, and that's exactly what I was doing.
Well, he was just at the supermarket, so you got one up on him. Listen, Gary, I'm
Miss you,
yeah.
Eric.
Miss you,
Hey, I'll miss
Gary.
you guys. I'll see you. Hey,
God bless.
and hello there. I understand there's 35,000 people watching this on streaming. That's amazing.
Hey,
Fantastic.
you
Amen.
realize what that cost me?
Well, I love you all. I'll see
Love
you.
you.
Okay?
Bye, Gary.
Love you.
Gary
Bye.
Sandy, ladies and gentlemen. I want to move on to Mr. Reed, who asked me to refer to him that way. It's kind of
Field
disheartening.
Marshal, Mr. Reed.
Field Marshal, Mr. Reed. I was always a late night jock, so I always related to your character, but I related to Howard's for his health regimen was kind of what I related to there. But the first time that we saw you, in the first episode where you walk into Mr. Carlson's office, you look like a member of the Funkadelics. I mean, you had the whole regalia, but almost immediately you became a rocker, that your persona. How much input did you have in the evolution of that character?
Well, actually, the character in the pilot was almost written to be sort of this flamboyant black man. And what I really...
I think actually Negro.
Negro, that's right. Negro, sorry. You would know more about that than I.
That's what Les Nessman said. There are a lot of Negroes
Yeah,
in
Negro.
sports.
But the wonderfulness of Hugh, not only as a writer, but as someone who could see actors. He doesn't mention this, but Hugh is also a wonderful actor. He's acted with, for me, a few projects. But he could see, I remember when I read for it, I don't even think that Jay and a few wanted me for the part, because at that time, I don't think that I was black enough in a sense of what was happening in television. They wanted more of a J.J. Character, Jimmy Walker character, broad and yo mama. And I really thought, man, this is going to be, I don't want to be 60-something years old, have somebody go, hey, Venus. And here we are. So I actually did not want the part in a sense of that. But when I sat down in front of Jay and Grant and the casting and Hugh, and he asked me what did I think about the part, I kind of mentioned that. I don't know how I said it. And he said, well, what do you? I said, well, most jocks that I knew, Frankie Crocker and all these wonderful jocks of radio in those days, were really split personalities. The daytime, the character on radio was broad. Didn't you see him in life go, he didn't look like the guy. They were always this other side. And Hugh assured me, he said, no, this is just a pilot. I don't know if it's going to get on, but I guarantee you we're going to develop this guy's other side, which back then was extraordinary because most characters in television were one-dimensional. And he said this character will be two-dimensional at least. And he allowed me to kind of explore that. And it was very interesting. And the stuff that he wrote for me in terms of the character and the changes haven't been the lax of in a long time in television.
Yeah, it was great to watch that because you guys created, usually TV does not get it right. If they're dealing with radio or hippies, they always screw it up. They always screw it up, They always make us look like idiots or heroin addicts or like, well, wait a minute, what about all the good stuff we did? But in this show, there was a respect for the art and we could relate to that. Let me go on to Jan here for a minute. How are you?
I'm fine. How
Good.
are you?
It's so nice to meet you in person.
Thank you.
You, of course, played Bailey Quarters. I've known a lot of women like Bailey, who in the early days of rock radio, as progressive as we were, the women's movement, civil rights, all the things that we were trying to do, there was still a lot of chauvinism in that era. And I've known some very bright, beautiful women who had to kind of fight to be taken seriously. And Bailey had that thing. I remember, well, you can't come to the meeting or get the coffee. But then, fortunately, that was out and you came in and created this wonderful character. Did you feel like you were making a statement when you were doing that?
Actually, not in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning. To tell you the dang truth. I had 3 lines, I think, on the interview when I came into your office, which was me, and me, 3 lines, and try to make me, and me into some kind of dialogue, and I'm not sure why you hired me in the first place with those 3 lines.
I know why.
Well,
Well, let's hear about that.
and
I'm a
I,
boy. And, I have Lonnie Anderson and Jan Smithers on a TV show. I think I'm not only chasing numbers, but I have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. It's great. Yeah, Jan was wonderful, and I wanted to say we were watching the show backstage, and that "Get Us Coffee" line, that seems so ancient to me. You know, I would hear, I wrote that? In what century did I write that?
No, that's really a good point. That's exactly right.
So in a way, the show kind of, maybe accidentally or something, it's kind of a bit of a history capsule of stuff back then, because there's a lot of stuff that you just go, what?
Well, since we're on that subject, I was going to ask the troublemaker something next, but I'll go to Lonnie instead. Your character was either right before or right at the time when the sexual harassment issue was finally coming to, even into our consciousness. Right. Because I remember guys, now I was raised better than that, honestly, but I do remember guys who would treat women in that way that you had to put up with. And that people were treated very differently back then. But Jennifer never put up with that crap. No. She never put up with that crap. That was a wonderful line that you were able to draw to be very attractive, alluring, even kind of use that, but not be used by it. Tell us about that.
Well, Hugh is instrumental with me in creating Jennifer, because she was kind of window dressing, and Hugh said, let's make her Lana Turner and the smartest person in the room. And I was like, oh, I was so thrilled, because I had been a brunette up until that time, so blondness was not something that I was even interested in, and certainly not being taken seriously. And so I spoke 7 languages. I completely cut everybody off at the knees if they came on to me. And yet I took Mr. Carlson like a mother. I took care of him. I protected him. I loved everybody. I nurtured everybody, but I didn't do anything. And, and so I dated men with lots of money.
Yeah.
And I had unexplained wealth, and I just, I just loved being at the station and taking care of my brood, really, was my character. And that's because Hugh said, let's have the glamorous woman be the smartest woman, and that was.
Can I say a little something about that? When you think up a show and you create the characters in your mind, you may think of actors or friends, family members you've known. It helps you write them. Then when you cast it and you realize, oh, well, this is Tim Reed is actually different. He's right. He's not what I was thinking of, but he'll be great. Then the other thing is with Lonnie and Howard and Jan and everybody, then they become the character, and it is the character you invented, but then they embody that character, and then you start, as a writer, chasing them. You start listening to their speech patterns. You start, you know what I mean? It's a real collaboration, and by the time you actually shoot the show, at least in my case, it was not really what I had envisioned at all. And I felt sort of out of control.
You did our cold opening every week for
Yeah.
the show. You know, where you get a comedian, you hire a comedian, you have the live audience show, and our comedian was Hugh.
I can
He
see
did-
why.
Yeah, he did the stand-up.
All right, let's talk to Howard here for a minute. God, maybe the sanest one in the bunch, which is frightening. Expect that, Howard. I just found out while we're talking upstairs, this man worked at the epicenter of freeform rock and roll radio, FM radio, which was KMPX in San Francisco, the very first FM rocker. This guy was there.
Aw, shucks.
You created such an iconic character with Dr. Johnny Fever. How much of that was it based on your own outlook, lifestyle?
I'd be the last person to be able to answer that if I were truly that character.
Yeah.
You know, it was there on the page for the most part. And at the same time, I knew half a dozen guys who had spent their lives in radio who were trying to play music that meant something to them. This is a KMPX FM station in San Francisco in the summer of love, 1967. How many of you were born before that? Where we were allowed to play anything. And assuming you could make it to the station. There's some wildly disparate characters on the air at that time. And in meeting Hugh to audition for this role, I just thought, gee, I know who this guy is. Components of him already existed in my experience. But as Hugh said, as everybody has said, it became a collaborative experience in that you used the phrase writers chasing the actors. Yeah. Writers would come on the set and when you were taking a break say, you know, I'm working on a story about yada, yada, yada. What do you think Fever would do if he were faced with a situation which they would describe? And 2-3 weeks later, you'd get a script that had what you'd suggested as part of it, as the beginning of that week's episode. But in the course of rehearsing through the week, you find things in rehearsal that aren't on the page. At the end of each day, there's a run-through, and we were allowed and encouraged to show alternatives that we had discovered largely through improvisation or as a result of not having learned the lines properly. But yet you had a chance to say, okay, here's the way you wrote it, and here's something we came up with. And Hugh would say, I like that, keep it, or no, let's stay with what we got. But you always had the feeling that what your input might be would be given real consideration. It wasn't lip service. So I never encountered as collaborative a situation in network TV in all my years there. I can speak to that. I did 6 years of series work following WKRP, and the writers were uniformly buried in their scripts and not paying attention to the life you're trying to give their words. And I am forever indebted to Hugh for making it clear that we were all in the same boat and it was sinking unless we paid attention to one another.
You know, when you use the word ensemble, it should include everybody, I think, from the writers to the directors to the actors
to the sound man,
to this, exactly.
Yeah.
Whoever's got an idea to make it better, let's hear it.
Yes, exactly, because the point is to make a great show, not to make you bigger than everybody else. It's to make...
Well, I don't know about that.
Lonnie, yeah, every radio station, good radio station I work for, had a woman there that we called the linchpin. She was the woman that always knew everything that was going on. And if you wanted to get something done, you didn't go to the program director, you didn't go to the general manager, you went to the linchpin. And you had that ability in there. You knew everything that was going on at the station.
Absolutely.
Talk about that for
Yeah.
me.
Well, I was like in charge of everybody.
Yeah.
I sat there and, you know, I answered the phone. I said, no, Mr. Carlson is dead. And, you know, and I didn't take any messages. I just threw them in the trash. But I made sure that everybody's lives were running well and the station was running well. So personally, I was keeping everybody together.
Right. Which
Yeah.
is really important, and because the place would have kind of drifted if somebody wasn't holding all those
There
reins at
had to
that
be
point.
shadow management.
Yes,
That
that's
was-
exactly right.
yeah.
And then I took care of Mr. Carlson and all his toys and all his stuff and made sure that he was okay. And I'd always say, you know, like, do you know where your ticket is? And do you know where your car is? And do you know? And so,
Yeah.
but you know, there's a lovely thing about Bailey and Jennifer that Hugh made happen over the years, because a lot of times there's rivalry if they're just two women in a workplace. And we were so different, and yet he found a camaraderie for us that he wrote into
Right.
the show. That was really special.
That was good, yeah, because it would have been kind of obvious going the other way to like, we got to art. No, that was great. One of the episodes I watched, I really wanted to compliment you guys on it. God, I hate to have to compliment you, but I think you wrote it, so, you know, here we go.
He wrote everything.
Yeah.
Problem.
It was a show about the ratings, and you were so accurate in your portrayal. I remember that Gary was holding an actual ARB diary. It wasn't like, well, we'll just get any book and look at it. You know, you could tell this was a real ratings book. And I just wanted to say you did such a great job explaining to the audience the pressure that people in radio are under every 4 months.
Absolutely.
You did a great job on that. It was really well written. What kind of feedback did you get, maybe not just to that episode, but any episode, from people in radio that were watching at the
They
time?
always wrote to say, you must have been at my station. And I took that as the greatest compliment.
Great.
We tried to be as authentic as possible. One choice we made is that that wasn't accurate, is I thought we'd have more fun with the turntables and not wearing the headphones. And by then they were going, you know, you guys were doing cassettes and all of that. And I thought the turntables were such a wonderful visual thing. And
Oh, they were. They were.
yeah.
Yeah.
I speak for all of us. I wish Frank Bonner and Richard Sanders were here tonight. Those guys were so funny. And I don't know. And Howard would always say, more music and less Nessman. And Les never got it. And he would, you know, he'd want to be the sports reporter, and he called Chichi Rodriguez Chai Rodriguez.
He was
But he
a
had the
great
silver
character.
sow.
Yeah.
The thing also is that whenever we would go visit a radio station, I
Yeah.
don't think I was in a radio station where some guy in weather or sports didn't have his office marked off with tape. Anywhere in America, you walk in a radio station and some guy would have
Did
his
Richard
tape.
start that?
That's
Did Richard
great.
do that? Did Richard bring that, the tape? Or did you
for
write
his
that in?
walls?
I beg your pardon?
Did Richard put the tape on the floor for his walls? Was that his idea?
But he read it in my script.
You read it?
That was a great bit,
ego, you nasty thing, you.
That was a great bit, though. That
was a great
was
Actually,
great.
that
Well, I
episode,
mean, if it wasn't Richard, though, it might not have been funny. It might have just been stupid. But he was
I
so,
remember,
so
there was a lot of
beautifully
talk.
out of his mind that it was just right. And he sold it. He sold it.
Oh,
We
yeah.
would have had
Oh,
to
yeah.
back off that in a heartbeat. It was a wonderful sight gag, making people knock on doors that weren't there.
well, the way that evolved, actually, we were rehearsing that week when the bullpen, as it was called, was being introduced. And for rehearsal, the floor was taped. and then it just evolved. I think it was suggested in
maybe
the
that's
script,
where I got the
and
idea,
then we said, well, let's keep it. And then we were Richard was about to go into the office, and he said, well, how do I get in? There's no key. And so I said, well, just try knocking.
Pretend to knock,
And
yeah.
he knocked, and then then it grew. So every time he would open the lock, he would open the door, he would step over, and he just made
It's
a
a
whole
kind
thing.
of gag that gave you guys a real fertile ground to cook up
Yes.
a lot of wonderful sight gags. Richard, when we were doing the pilot, you remember when that light fell down that struck him in the head, and so he had to wear a bandage, and
He wore a bandage every show.
yeah. Well, the deal was they came to me and said, "Here, you have to write something that explains the bandage." Remember that, Jay?
No, I didn't.
Oh, well,
I think I was
because they
sleeping
didn't
when
ask you
that.
to write. Boy, I sure remembered. And I sat in my office for an hour and came up with nothing. And my idea was, don't explain it.
Exactly.
And so then he started every show. This was his own idea. He'd show up and he'd have a bandage here and a bandage here. And pretty soon we were getting tons of bandage mail.
Remember, he got a photo from a fan club, and they all had a Band-Aid on a different place.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you, I don't remember, did you ever have visits from actual rock and roll musicians? Did they ever come in on the show? I can't remember if you ever did that.
I don't know, Howard, you knew a lot of the big time guys.
Yeah, and I don't remember any of them coming on the show, so they may have been there.
Well, we created a group, Scum of the Earth.
That's
Of
right.
the earth.
That was
That guy was a real musician, the English guy.
Michael DeBar. And so was,
Michael DeBar?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I knew him.
he was part of Scum of the Earth. And
Right.
Peter Elbling. And the other cat who played the drummer was a drummer,
Yeah.
not an
Yeah,
actor. Michael and Peter were both actors.
Yeah, and in the show, we called for a banner in the lobby that said, "Welcome, Scum." And so the writers got that, and oh dear God, we got in so much trouble for this. CBS affiliates were having their they were coming to our studio.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. That is great. That's
Man, they were
fantastic.
bringing them in on these buses and wining and dining them, and some famous restaurant was courting the thing. They looked up and they were our offices, and maybe Gunselman. I want to hit. Anyhow, here's a banner and said, "Welcome, Scum." And the next thing I knew, 2 pages from CBS came running into my office. Oh, right, very close to having a heart attack. They had their little, "You must take this down immediately." And we did, because we obeyed the rules.
Sure you did. Yeah. Howard was the first to raise his hand and say, "Could I do that?" Yeah.
To give you an example of how television has changed and how little it's changed, CBS initially objected. Some of you may remember we used to play a commercial that had been created by the writers and recorded for Red Wigglers, the Cadillac of worms. CBS said you can't use that Cadillac because you're giving Cadillacs a free plug.
That's the damn truth. That's incredible.
The
isn't it?
one thing about the writing that I look back on now with such fond memories, because it was a radical show. I mean, the kind of episodes that would come out of Hugh's mind and the rest of the writers. I remember the day we were having a party at Hugh's house on the weekend, and he came up with the idea to do a show on the Who concert, the tragedy of the Who concert. We were all standing around with a little too much to drink, and Hugh said to one of the writers, "You know, we're a radio station in Cincinnati, and this happened there. We would have to do something about that." And literally the next Monday, that was like on a Saturday, down comes this script about the Who concert. Now, the problem with that is that the networks were concerned, as they should be, and everyone was concerned, but he stuck to it, and we had to literally, they didn't want us to do the story, they gave him a hard time. It was a very frustrating week for all of us, but the show was done. But they wouldn't allow it to air until the city council of Cincinnati viewed the episode. They would have to view the episode, and if they said no, that episode was not going to air. But they said yes, air the episode. It was that kind of, there were many shows that we did like that was really against the protocol of the network. And it caused Hugh a lot of angst, I'm sure. But those are the kind of things that kept us so involved in the show and the stories and the writing. And I thank him for that.
Could I I'd just like to congratulate Hugh, but I also have to mention Grant Tinker, who's head of MTM, because Grant would always say to the network, I'd heard it practically every show I ever did at MTM, no, that's the way the writer wants it. And if you don't, in those days, they were independent companies, but there was nobody quite like Grant, who would just love writing, back the writers, and always stand up. And if it had been in another studio, that show would never have been made.
I have to totally agree with that. Grant Tinker is the reason I got to work in television. But as far as that goes, with the people who worked at MTM, who later went and worked other places and all that, found out we had been in some kind of fool's paradise. We had no idea that the management would be that kind and respectful and protective. And oftentimes, Grant could intercede, not oftentimes, most of it, when anything big came up, it couldn't have been negotiated out to our favor if it weren't for Grant Tinker and that kind of company and that kind of guy. Or I don't know if they're still around. I sure hope so, but I don't think so.
Well, there are no real independent producers anymore, because the network owns everything. In those days,
Yeah.
the network didn't own the shows.
I'd like to refer to a show that I thought was tremendously important. I believe it was first season. How many of you remember a show called Who is Gordon Sims? It was a show about Venus flytrap, and it was revealed that he had gone AWOL before he was discharged from the Army after a tour of duty in Vietnam. And it investigated what a black man's attitude toward the war in Vietnam might have been, what it might have led him to do. And I thought for a sitcom to investigate such a subject was incredibly brave, and I take my hat off to you today.
Amen.
Still for that.
Did you win the Humanitas Award for that?
You know, that's a great point. And I know this is going to be, splitting hairs a little bit, but because I'm an FM guy and we always viewed ourselves as Viva la Revolution, and we were the, ones pushing against the AM stereotype in top 40. I was kind of surprised, especially with that depth of subject matter, that you said it at an AM station rather than an FM. And tell me why you did that.
I thought that the station was so square at the beginning, it had to be AM.
Interesting.
I mean, Howard said in the pilot, well, they're going to change the music format. Maybe we're going all Hawaiian.
Right.
It was that bad a shape. So I thought it couldn't be an FM station.
Would it be too hip already?
That was so middle class, middle part of the country, right, white bread, out of touch.
Right. If I could, let me throw out a couple of names of people we haven't had a chance to talk about. Just react to them. Frank Bonner, who I thought nailed the salesman. I mean, that was every guy we ever had to put up with. Yeah. So tell us your thoughts on him.
Frank's salesman was always summed up for me with that gesture that he was thinking about something.
Yeah.
But sometimes he would be, during the rehearsal week, we wouldn't see the brilliant moments that he would have in front of the audience.
right.
I mean, it would go along, and yes, Frank is hysterically funny, and then he would just bowl us over during the performance, and probably the only times that you'd crack up and totally lose it were because Frank did something that was so incredibly unexpected.
Rose
Yeah.
up to it.
And here's a tragedy real quick about some actors who have a wonderful part. After that, people were looking for Frank Bonner-like actors.
Oh, no.
Not Frank, mind you.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Man, that's
boy.
not right.
Yeah.
That's not
No.
right. You create something like that.
Look.
Did you want to say something, Jan?
I was just going to say he had an energy in his own, and he made it so much fun for all of us. It wasn't even like you had to play opposite him, or you could just sort of be filler around him, which was a wonderful thing because he would make the scene.
Well, it's kind of like a force of nature of this.
Force of nature.
Yeah.
Absolutely unusually weird.
Because, I mean, down to the white belt and
Everything.
white
And he
shoes
had it
and
down,
ridiculous.
and he
It was
wasn't like,
a force against nature.
yes, that's right. But, and,
Because there was nothing natural about this
right,
man.
and he understood it, but Frank as a person is not like that at all.
Not a bit.
Oh, really?
No,
Oh, not a
not
bit.
at all.
I think I got the idea for his outfits getting delayed at the Atlanta airport in 1978. God damn, I hope nobody lights a match. All these suits are going to go up.
Again, all we're asking for is an hour a week at the Improv. Dude, I'll be there. I'll be there. I swear to God, you got to do this, man. This may be difficult, but Gordon Jump. Let's talk about him for a minute. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say he had the same nature. He went to town when he was speaking. When he had his lines, he just went to town, and he would move all over the place and owned it, just like Frank did in his own way. And they
Gordon was the master of the take.
he was
You
the
know,
man.
Hugh had to cut laughs from the show to make it come in on time, because Gordon could do 9 to 11 takes, and the audience would just be cracking up, and we'd never ever get to the rest of the show.
Wow.
That's how
Wow.
good he was. I mean, he was the master.
And also when we had some tough times and, we'd be fighting with one another, which was rare, but, we were always on the edge of getting canceled, and they moved our time slot 30 times. We couldn't believe it. And sometimes we'd have little meetings among ourselves, and Gordon was always the adult in the room.
Yeah, he was.
He was
Very
very
spiritual man.
special. Very,
Very spiritual man?
Yes.
Really special, and full of compassion and love.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah.
That's nice to hear.
I do have to say one thing. It was odd. The third year, somebody came up to me and said, "Hugh, do you know our sound man's deaf?" And I said, "I did not know that." They said, "No, I swear to God, he's deaf as a post." And I said, "Well, I think the sound's been pretty good." But the union, they'll send you the guy. They'll send you the older guy, the senior guy, and the sound for a deaf guy, he was out of sight. I thank Bill Paley, who I actually met once. I said, "Hello, Mr. Paley," and I thank the center, and I'm so happy that the Shout Factory has made this thing possible. And you've been a wonderful, obvious fan of the show, and I think a lot of your questions have been pretty mean, but overall.
I understand. Honestly, it's sitting here, I have to say, and I mean this as a high compliment, you have a little touch of Samuel Clemens and a little touch of Will Rogers in you. And I'm telling you, you do.
Wow.
You do. Oh, let me tell you, it was a real honor meeting you. And thank you all for all the years and the enjoyment that you gave us.
Bravo.